Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly break down how 10-man Arsenal snatched a point against Chelsea in today's London derby at Stamford Bridge. But before we do that, don't forget to give our video a thumbs up if you do enjoy it. The bell below does give you daily notifications regarding our organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel on our road to 3K subscribers. So when we break down the game and we do look at the board, we have Chelsea in a 4-3-3, Arsenal in a 4-2-3-1. And the manner in which both sides looked to approach the game was very predictable here. Because the midfield battle was set in stone, we knew what roles each player would play. We know Jorginho would try to drop off a bit deeper and Mesut Ozil would look to close him down. And we knew that Mesut Ozil would try to find space between the lines and Jorginho would have to track that movement. We had Xhaka against N'Golo Kanté, and we also had Lucas Torreira against Mateo Kovacic. What was key about Chelsea going forward in those early stages of the first half was that they looked to press high from the front. So we did have Willian and Hudson-Odoi looking to close down Saka and Bellerin, and that did leave Tammy Abraham in a 2v1 situation against Mustafi and David Luiz. Now, the logical thing for Chelsea to do here would be to have Abraham step into the path of David Luiz. David Luiz is the prominent passer here, and if you can have Abraham step in towards his path, that forces Mustafi to push higher up the pitch. And even though you probably would want to have someone press him to try and force him into a mistake, the higher you have him up the pitch, you can block off those passing lanes and force him into a mistake, and that would see Chelsea break in transition swiftly. However, some of the issues that Chelsea encountered in that first half was that their pressing was disjointed throughout. You could have Tammy Abraham stepping into the path of Mustafi, and that would see N'Golo Kanté step toward David Luiz. But the problem here was that Kanté wasn't blocking off the passing lane toward Xhaka, and that afforded Arsenal space to play into midfield. The other issues that they did have was that there were times where the front three were looking to close down, and all it took was Lucas Torreira to drop off a bit deeper, and we would see Mateo Kovacic hold his position, and that would leave Lucas Torreira with a passing lane to receive the ball and push forward. So Chelsea's pressing did force them into some issues in that opening half, but for the most part, they handled Arsenal's threat throughout the pitch very well. The one key theme here was Mesut Ozil's movement. He often drifted out into that right touch line to try and receive the ball in deeper positions. The one thing that was odd there was that Nicolas Pepe should probably shift his movement when Ozil drops into that zone, but he still held the touch line, and that made it very easy for Emerson to mark him out of the game. But when Ozil shifted out into that position, we didn't see Jorginho follow him across the pitch. What they did there was that they simply switched off. They had Kovacic shift into the path of Ozil, and Jorginho just pushed a bit higher to close down Torreira, and that helped Chelsea ensure that they covered the midfield ground by pressing man v man. But for the most part, this should have been easy for Chelsea. If you have Abraham stepping forward to a center back, you could push the spare shuttler out to Luiz or Mustafi and then have Jorginho cover the spare man, because in that case you force Arsenal to play long, and that does leave Ozil free between the lines, but you have to fancy Rudiger and Christensen to win aerial duels against Lacazette. So that could have been the route that they chose to press from, but they didn't go about their business that way, and they did close down Ozil when he shifted out into those positions. But Arsenal did approach the game a bit differently, because going forward, what we ended up seeing from Arsenal is that we did have Bellerin a bit narrow, and that forced Saka to push forward higher up the pitch, trying to get the ball in behind Hudson-Odoi. What also should be said about Arsenal's approach was that, yes, their midfield was closed out of the game, but we did see them press a bit different. We did see Lacazette press forward to close down Christensen, and that did create an avenue for Nicolas Pepe to step into the path of Rudiger, but also blocking off the passing lane in towards Emerson to ensure that he couldn't get the ball and push forward. But like I said, in those opening minutes, we got an idea of how both sides look to approach the game. For Arsenal, what we ended up seeing there is that they wanted to attack down that left-hand side. We ended up seeing Saka win a loose ball from a Jorginho header, and he located Martinelli dropping off on Azpilicueta. What he ends up doing there is he plays the ball beyond Hudson-Odoi for Martinelli, and they combine via 1-2, and we end up seeing Saka storm past Azpilicueta and playing a ball beyond the sliding Jorginho for Martinelli breaking down that left channel. Now we have Martinelli running at Christensen, Christensen and Saka on the overlap, and Martinelli plays in Saka, but his cross is overhit. Nonetheless, quick combination play between Saka and Martinelli got Arsenal forward down that left-hand side, and that was a consistent theme throughout this game, and we'll get to that in a bit. So when you assess the manner in which Chelsea's attack was constructed, Hudson-Odoi was likely to be the key man here. Willian was cutting in narrow against Bellerin, and Emerson didn't look to push forward, probably wary of the pace of Nicolas Pepe in transition. We did have N'Golo Kante pushing forward, but he wasn't linking play with Tammy Abraham, who was isolated up front. And with Kovacic and Jorginho marked out of the game in deeper positions, they weren't looking to go long to Abraham. And down the left-hand side, what ended up happening there was that Azpilicueta did adopt a high position, but given the fact that Saka was playing at left back and he's not a natural left back, that gave Chelsea the onus to play balls out to Hudson-Odoi. With that being said, with David Luiz's dismissal, we did see Arsenal shift to a 4-4-1 with Ozil moving to a left central midfield role and Xhaka moving to left center back. This did see a shift in Chelsea's overall approach. They did push more men forward, obviously, and now what ended up happening here was that Lacazette had to drop off a bit deeper, trying to block off the passing lane into Jorginho while trying to ensure that the center backs weren't able to push into Arsenal's half to dictate possession from deeper positions, which they eventually did by sliding balls out into the wider areas. The difference here was N'Golo Kante, because now he was able to push a bit higher and help Abraham pressing by stepping into the path of Xhaka, but his overall positioning was a bit more adventurous. He was able to run beyond Ozil, who isn't renowned for his defensive discipline, and we often saw him adopt positions ahead of Xhaka or ahead of Saka, or sometimes even between both. And that ensured that Arsenal's back four was narrow, because you do have Willian looking to cut in central, and now you have Kante occupying either Xhaka or occupying Saka. That often led to Arsenal eventually becoming a back five, because with Saka being occupied in that narrow position, Martinelli had to drop off a bit deeper to ensure that he tracked the runs of Hudson-Odoi. So now what you end up seeing there is that they can have 3v2 if Azpilicueta underlaps, because now Ozil is tasked with dealing perhaps with Jorginho pushing forward, and you had Tyrrell occupied by Kovacic. So it wasn't a surprise that Chelsea ended up creating one of their better chances from that side of the pitch. What we ended up seeing was Christensen sliding the ball out into the path of Hudson-Odoi, hugging the touchline on the right-hand side. You ended up seeing Saka being occupied by N'Golo Kante, and what ended up happening here was that Azpilicueta made an underlapping run in between Martinelli and Saka to pull Saka out of position. And with Ozil looking to shift over, what Hudson-Odoi was able to do there is that Kante shifted out into the path of Xhaka, and Hudson-Odoi split Saka and Ozil to play the ball into the path of Kante, and Kante backheeled it into the path of Hudson-Odoi, and he fired a shot on goal that was pushed away by Leno. Still, despite Chelsea having that man advantage heading into halftime, that was arguably their best chance from open play. And when we assess the final minutes of that half, we're able to break down a moment where Chelsea's pressing nearly led to their downfall. What we end up seeing here is Leno playing the ball to Xhaka, and with Abraham not stepping in towards that path, we end up seeing Hudson-Odoi step into the path of Xhaka. Lucas Torreira drops off into a deeper position, but what ends up happening here is that we have Chelsea pressing high, but Kovacic doesn't step into his man. So what ends up happening is that Xhaka plays the ball into the path of Torreira, and he easily side foots the ball into the path of Saka. So now Saka has the ball, Hudson-Odoi pressed Xhaka, and that sees Kante press Saka to cover for Hudson-Odoi. Kante steps into that position, but Martinelli once again drops off on Azpilicueta to pull him out a bit deeper, and those two combine, and we end up seeing Saka play the ball beyond Kante to Martinelli. He gets the ball back, and he charges by Azpilicueta, and as he breaks towards the stepping Christensen, Martinelli overlaps, and he gets the ball in that left channel. Kovacic did a good job of tracking the run, even though he didn't step out to mark Torreira. And when Martinelli breaks into that left channel, before Kovacic can come across, he delivers a cross into the path of Lacazette. but Rudiger clears it into the path of Pepe, who's supposed to be going 1v1 with Emerson, but he can't beat him. He ends up poking the ball into the path of Bellerin, but his cross is cleared by Azpilicueta. So when we look to the second half, we saw a more defined pattern in the match. Arsenal dropping off more deeper in that 4-4-1. We had N'Golo Kanté stepping a bit higher to close down Xhaka on a consistent basis, and now he was able to do that without leaving Chelsea open in midfield because Jorginho could shift over as the spare man to close down Lucas Torreira without worrying about Mesut Ozil's movement. We had Lacazette looking to shift into the path of Jorginho to try and limit his ability to dictate the game, and early on in that second half, when Lacazette wasn't able to follow Jorginho across the pitch, Lucas Torreira was taking it upon himself to step in to the Chelsea deep-lying midfielder, and there was one occasion in particular where he almost dispossessed him when Jorginho dropped off to the edge of the Chelsea box, and that nearly led to an Arsenal chance. However, for Arsenal, their biggest issue here was how were they going to be able to score goals in that second half as they were already down 1-0? Because from a defensive aspect, nothing really changed in terms of their jobs. Out in the wider areas, it still was 2v2, but the biggest worry now was that Ozil and Lucas Torreira had to shift over to ensure that they weren't overloaded 3v2. And frankly, we saw a contrast in both sides. Down the left-hand side, we saw Martinelli and Saka offer some sort of attacking threat going forward in transition, but down the right-hand side, Arsenal were getting nothing. Nicolas Pepe wasn't offering a threat going forward. He couldn't beat Emerson 1v1, couldn't get any opportunities to break in transition, and defensively, he was constantly letting Emerson push forward to get into goal-scoring positions in the final third. When we compare the two, we start on the left-hand side where Jorginho shifts the ball out to Willian in the deeper position and Emerson was overlapping a bit higher. And Willian is closed down by Nicolas Pepe and Bellerin, but what he ends up locating is Kovacic making a run off Mesut Ozil into left half space. Willian ends up splitting Pepe and Bellerin to find Kovacic in left half space, and that pulls Mustafi out of position, and Kovacic pulls the ball back to Tammy Abraham, breaking on goal ahead of Xhaka, but he miskicks his effort, and Arsenal get off the hook there. Whereas when we look to the right-hand side, Arsenal didn't really encounter those issues there because Kanté adopted an advanced position ahead of Xhaka, and Xhaka would fancy his chances in an aerial duel with Kanté, and Arsenal's duel of Martinelli and Saka did do a much better job in terms of general effort. The issue down Arsenal's right-hand side did worry Mikel Arteta, so he turned to his bench and he ended up bringing on Guendouzi for Mesut Ozil. Saka and Martinelli presented the only hope for Arsenal to break into good attacking positions, and that was a big worry because as that game did wear on, we ended up seeing more underlapping runs from Azpilicueta, which pushed Saka narrow and forced Martinelli to defend against Hudson-Odoi, and with Lacazette dropping off deeper to keep Arsenal compact and try to keep Jorginho out of the game, Arsenal had no legitimate threat up front to try and hold up the ball to get Arsenal into attacking zones in transition, and that often saw Tyrrell punt the ball back to Chelsea on a consistent basis. Like I said, Lampard did turn to his bench. He ended up bringing on Mason Mount and Ross Barkley, and we ended up seeing Barkley play on the right and Mount on the left ahead of Jorginho to give Chelsea more attack-minded options from midfield. However, their route to goal still stemmed down the wide areas. What we ended up seeing was Christensen step forward and clip a ball over a narrow Bellerin occupied by Mason Mount into the path of Willian running off Nicolas Pepe. What we end up seeing there is that Willian now is able to run at Bellerin because Mount was occupying him, and then Mount ran towards Mustafi. Willian now is able to run at Bellerin, who doesn't step forward, and he cuts central and he fires a shot on goal that Leno does push away. That was an avoidable situation by Arsenal, and frankly, what should have happened there were two things. Guendouzi should have tracked the run of Mason Mount so that Bellerin could shift out into the path of Willian to close him down, and if that wasn't the case and they wanted Bellerin to stick with Mount, what Nicolas Pepe should have been doing was that he should have dropped off into the path of Willian to track that run, and then if Emerson did look to push forward, Guendouzi, who was the spare man, should shift out to close down Emerson, and that would have prevented Chelsea from getting another goal-scoring opportunity. Lampard turned to his bench once again, and we ended up seeing Michy Batshuayi come on for Willian as Chelsea moved to a 4-4-2 with Mount and Hudson-Odoi out in the wider areas. And once again, we saw an instant reaction from the Blues. This time it's Jorginho getting a square pass from Hudson-Odoi on the left, and before Guendouzi could step out to him, what we see Jorginho do is he locates the run of Ross Barkley off Lucas Torreira. We have Mustafi occupied by Michy Batshuayi shifting out into half space, and Xhaka was occupied by Abraham. So Barkley ran off Torreira to meet Jorginho's pass, but he can only flick a header on goal that Leno was able to comfortably save. But that was one of the few times we did see Jorginho play a ball over the top in a midfield run bypass Arsenal's defense, and that did look promising for Chelsea. However, Arteta did turn to his bench following that chance by bringing on holding for Pepe as we saw Arsenal shift to more of a 3-4-2. He wanted 3 defenders to give him a spare man against Abraham and Michy Batshuayi, and it did push Martinelli a bit higher to offer some support to Lacazette. Arsenal dropped into a 5-2-2 following Bellerin's equalizer, and Arteta turned to his bench once again, bringing on Joe Willock for Martinelli, and they shifted into a 5-3-1 to close out the game. When you break down the game as a whole, this was dominated in the wider areas. Hudson-Odoi played a key role for Chelsea, and Martinelli and Saka gave Arsenal hope in transition. Nonetheless, this is 2 drop points from Chelsea, and it exposed the issues that they have under Lampard. No guile and creativity in the final third, and they struggle to create chances from open play if they aren't pressing high, breaking in transition, or forcing their opposition into mistakes from that press. Nonetheless, Arsenal will be happy here. They fell behind twice. Mikel Arteta made tactical changes, and they were able to get 2 goals from unlikely sources, Bellerin and Martinelli. But when you do assess it, this game was reliant on defensive mistakes that shouldn't be made at this level. The Mustafi back pass, which led to David Luiz taking out Abraham. When you look to Arsenal's goal, Martinelli shouldn't be breaking from his own box following a Chelsea corner kick to run by Kovacic, Emerson, and Conte. And then you look at the set piece errors following Chelsea's second goal, and there's no way that Abraham and Emerson should allow Bellerin to cut in to finish. So when you assess it, the point share does make sense, but Chelsea will feel like they dropped 2 points here because Arsenal were down to 10 men for majority of the game. But let me know what you guys think. Are Chelsea favorites to finish in the top 4? And do you think Arsenal have made positive strides under Mikel Arteta? Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget I upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And once again, if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.